Okay, so I want you to imagine waking up tomorrow morning and, walking down to your local polling station to vote.
Right, just a standard election day.
Exactly. But when you get your ballot and look down at it, something is just completely wrong.
Let me guess, no names.
No, the names are there, but there are absolutely no party logos. None of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No donkeys, no elephants, no red or blue color coding, no acronyms, just a completely blank list of individuals.
That would be incredibly disorienting for most people.
It really would, but it gets crazier. Because to even get the name printed on that piece of paper, your local politician was legally required to hold a Ph.D. in their specific field.
A literal doctorate.
Yes, and they had to pass this grueling, state-administered written exam on constitutional law and macroeconomics before they could even run.
Which, I mean, is a massive barrier to entry.
Massive. And oh, their personal bank accounts. They are now audited by the government every single year.
Right, just constant surveillance of their finances.
Exactly. And if you, the voter, catch them stealing from the public purse, say they embezzle some funds, they don't just lose their job or go to some cushy white-collar prison.
They get fined, right?
Oh, it's way past a fine. The government legally bankrupts them by seizing exactly double what they stole.
Jeez. So they leave them with literally less than nothing.
Less than nothing. Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everyone. If you are listening to this right now, you are what we like to call the learner.
That's right.
You're here because you want to understand the hidden mechanics of the world. You know, how things work, the second-order effects of massive decisions, and occasionally, like today, how people propose to just completely tear down our current reality and rebuild it from scratch.
Yeah, and today's topic is definitely a complete teardown.
It really is. We are looking at a stack of source material that details a highly engineered blueprint for a radically different system of government. It's known as the Navbharat Model.
And blueprint is really the only accurate word for this. Like, we aren't dealing with some loose philosophical manifesto here.
Yeah, right. It's not just a bunch of guys saying power to the people.
No, not at all. This is a highly specific gear-by-gear schematic. I mean, it dictates exactly who gets to sit in the executive chair, the hyper-specific academic qualifications they need, and the absolute financial ruin they face if they break the public trust.
Before we get into the actual gears of this machine, though, we do have to set a baseline for this discussion.
Yeah, that's crucial.
Because the Navbharat model contains some sweeping, highly politically charged proposals. We're talking about the legal abolition of capitalist governance, the total dismantling of political parties.
It was huge.
It's massive, and it enforces these extreme social mandates. So for you, the listener, it's really important to know that our mission today is purely analytical.
We aren't here to endorse this as some sort of utopian masterstroke.
Exactly. Nor are we here to dismiss it as a dystopian nightmare. We are entirely removing the left-wing and right-wing lenses for this deep dive.
Right, we're basically stepping into the shoes of systems engineers today.
Perfect way to put it. We just want to see how the engine is supposed to run, purely according to the text itself.
Well, to understand how this particular engine runs, you kind of have to look at what they're stripping out of the chassis first.
Okay, let's get into it. What are they tearing out?
So the foundational premise of the Navbharat model, like the absolute ground zero of this blueprint, is a totally nonpartisan governance system.
Which means no parties.
Right. The text explicitly mandates a complete and total ban on political parties. It goes further than just the organizations themselves.
Wait, how much further?
Well, flags associated with political parties are outlawed.
Wow.
Yeah. And election symbols, which, are historically a massive part of how voting works and how candidates are identified in a lot of robust democracies, those are completely banned too.
See, the psychological implications of that are just massive to me.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we rely so heavily on heuristics, right? Those mental shortcuts that save our brains from cognitive overload.
Right. No one has time to research 100 different candidates.
Exactly. If I see a candidate has a specific party color or mascot next to their name, I instantly have this rough, 80% accurate idea of what their platform probably looks like.
You know where they stand on taxes, social issues, all that.
Yeah, it saves me days of research. If you ban all of that, you are forcing the voter to fly completely blind.
You really are.
Voting suddenly transitions from this low-effort tribal allegiance thing into an incredibly labor-intensive research project for the average citizen. It's like stripping the brand names off cereal boxes and forcing the consumer to only read the nutritional label.
Ah, that's a great analogy. And you're hitting on the exact friction point of removing those heuristics. By outlawing the party infrastructure, the model is intentionally trying to destroy tribalism by design.
Because you literally can't vote along party lines anymore.
Exactly. Because those lines have been legally erased from reality. You are forced to evaluate the individual human being standing right in front of you.
Okay, but it doesn't just stop at removing the logos, does it?
No, it goes way deeper. It explicitly calls for the legal abolition of what it terms capitalist governance based on money power.
Capitalist governance based on money power. That is a heavy phrase.
It is. It also legally abolishes dynastic politics, nepotism, and hooliganism.
So no more political families passing down Senate seats like royalty.
Right, exactly. The end result is that every single individual who wants to run for public office must contest the election purely as an independent.
They have to run entirely on their own merit. No party war chest, no corporate financial backing, no riding the coattails of a famous family name.
That's the idea, yeah.
But let's follow that logic to its natural conclusion for a second. Let's look at the second order effect.
Okay, where does that lead?
Well, if you completely abolish political parties and you legally abolish this money power, you create a massive vacuum in how a candidate actually gets recognized.
Because communication requires resources.
Exactly. If a brilliant, highly meritorious, but completely unknown person wants to run for office, how do they get their message out to, say, 10 million people?
Without a party apparatus or millions of dollars in ad buys, you mean?
Right. It feels like you risk a scenario where only people who are already famous, like celebrities, actors, prominent media figures, have the natural monopoly on public attention. They'd be the only ones who could actually win an election.
Yeah, that is the structural paradox of mandating a purely independent, demonetized electoral system.
The blueprint just assumes that true merit will naturally and organically rise to the top of the public consciousness.
Which is a huge assumption. The reality of human sociology is that attention is a scarce resource, and it usually requires capital to capture it.
Right. If you ban centralized political money, the power doesn't just disappear.
No, it just transfers. It likely transfers to whoever controls the media narrative,
Yeah.
or to those with pre-existing social prominence, like you said.
So how does the Navbharat model deal with that popularity contest?
Well, it attempts to circumvent it entirely. It tries to level the playing field not by giving everyone a megaphone, but by heavily regulating the entry pool itself.
Okay, so they're restricting who can even step up to the microphone.
Exactly. It replaces the political party heuristic with a ruthless, state-mandated academic and psychological heuristic.
So if we strip away the party branding and the campaign financing, voters need a new way to measure a candidate's worth.
And the blueprint provides that by essentially turning the entire democratic process into a hyper-elite job interview.
Let's talk about the qualifications for this interview, because looking at the source material, they are rigid, quantitative, and completely uncompromising.
They really are. Let's start with the biological parameters.
Biological. Okay, I'm listening.
The age of administrators is strictly restricted. You must be between 25 and 55 years old to hold office.
Wow. 25 to 55, that is a very narrow window of eligibility compared to global norms.
It really is. It establishes a hard floor. So, no one fresh out of university at 22 can be handed the reins of state.
Which makes sense.
But more importantly, it establishes an absolute immovable ceiling. The text mandates compulsory retirement on the exact day an administrator turns 55.
Wait, the exact day.
The exact day.
Okay, so mandatory retirement on their 55th birthday. That's like a bureaucratic Cinderella story. The clock strikes midnight, and your political career turns into a pumpkin.
Pretty much.
Think about the implications of that. What if you are the prime minister and you are in the middle of negotiating a tense multinational peace treaty? Or you're managing the rollout of some massive trillion-dollar infrastructure initiative.
And then your birthday rolls around.
Right. The calendar ticks over to midnight, and you are legally required to pack your belongings into a cardboard box and leave the building.
Yep.
It doesn't matter how popular you are. It doesn't matter if the crisis is ongoing. You are just done.
It operates as a structural fail-safe mechanism against gerontocracy. The rule by the elderly.
Which is a massive complaint in a lot of current systems.
Exactly. If you look at many modern political systems, one of the primary critiques is the stagnation of leadership. You have individuals holding on to seats of immense power into their 70s and 80s.
Which creates this huge disconnect between the lived reality of the younger electorate and the actual decision makers.
Right. By enforcing a hard biological stop at 55, the model guarantees constant, mandatory generational turnover.
It forces new blood into the system.
Yeah, it ensures that no single individual can ever build a lifelong, multi-decade fiefdom out of a single seat of power.
But I mean, the cost of that forced turnover is the total eradication of deep institutional
That
memory.
is the trade-off, yeah.
Like, a 56-year-old leader might be at the absolute zenith of their strategic wisdom. They might have spent 30 years building relationships with foreign diplomats, understanding the subtle nuances of geopolitical leverage.
Learning from past legislative failures, right?
Exactly. And this model says that accumulated wisdom is entirely invalid the moment they blow out the candles on their 55th birthday cake.
It privileges youthful energy and mid-career sharpness over elder statesmanship. It fundamentally views political power as a temporary, high-intensity assignment rather than a lifelong vocation.
Okay, so that's the age filter. What's next?
Well, age is merely the outermost filter. Once you are within that 25 to 55 window, the model applies a really aggressive educational sieve.
An educational sieve.
Yeah, it essentially mandates a full-scale technocracy. For grassroots levels, like a ward member or a panchayat representative, the baseline is that they must have passed at least their SSLC +2 or hold a degree.
Okay, let's just ground this for listeners who might not be familiar with those specific terms. A panchayat is essentially a village-level local council in India dealing with local administration.
Right.
And SSLC stands for Secondary School Leaving Certificate, which is roughly equivalent to finishing the 10th grade, while +2 equates to completing high school.
Exactly.
So for the absolute entry level of local governance, you need a high school education or a bachelor's degree.
That is the absolute minimum floor to even participate in the lowest rungs of the system.
Which honestly doesn't sound too crazy for local government.
No, but the gradient gets incredibly steep as you move up the hierarchy.
How steep?
Well, for MLAs members of the Legislative Assembly at the state level and MPS members of Parliament at the national level, as well as ministers, they must hold a recognized degree.
Okay, a college degree for state and national reps. Still fairly standard.
But here's where the true technocratic nature of the blueprint reveals itself. If you want to be a minister or an advisor handling crucial, complex departments,
Like which ones?
specifically health, finance, science, technology, and law, the text legally mandates that you must hold a Ph.D. in that specific field.
A PhD.
Oh, wow.
Yes, mandatorily.
So the Minister of Health isn't just a charismatic career politician who got assigned the health portfolio because they, helped the prime minister win a key swing state.
Right, no political favors.
They have to be an actual credentialed doctor or medical researcher with a doctorate. Exactly. The finance minister has to have a Ph.D. in economics or finance. The Minister of Science must be a published, peer-reviewed scientist.
That entirely eliminates the concept of the generalist politician.
Completely. And if you think about it, in almost every current democratic system, a politician operates as a manager of experts, not an expert themselves.
That's a really good point. Like, a leader might serve as the Minister of Transportation for 3 years, then get reshuffled in a cabinet change to become the Minister of Agriculture,
Right, and then eventually become the Minister of Defense.
without having any formal background in logistics, farming, or military strategy.
Because their core competency is political maneuvering, public relations, and broad management.
But the Navbharat model wholly rejects that premise.
It demands that the individual running the legal apparatus of the nation is quite literally a doctor of jurisprudence.
I mean, on paper, the logic is incredibly seductive. Of course, you want the person in charge of a global pandemic response to actually understand epidemiology on a molecular level.
It sounds perfect in theory.
Right. Of course, you want the person writing tax code to understand macroeconomic theory. But let's look at the friction point here.
Okay, what's the friction?
A PhD implies a deep, incredibly narrow focus on a very specific academic niche.
Yes, it does.
Like, a brilliant research scientist might spend 10 years studying one specific protein folding sequence in a lab.
Right.
Does that high-level, isolated academic achievement automatically translate into the administrative competence required to manage a sprawling bureaucratic government department?
With hundreds of thousands of employees and competing budgetary interests.
Exactly. Being a great scientist does not make you a great manager.
You're highlighting the classic tension between leadership and expertise here. The model relies on the assumption that extreme academic rigor translates horizontally into operational and logistical brilliance.
Which is a huge leap of faith.
It is. It privileges formal, institutionalized education above absolutely everything else. Consequently, it completely discounts self-taught brilliance, entrepreneurial success, or the kind of practical, street-level organizing wisdom that doesn't come with a university stamp of approval.
So someone who built a massive, highly efficient logistics company from scratch without going to college.
Would be legally barred from running the transportation department.
That is wild. But okay, that reliance on academic metrics actually brings us to the most fascinating and, frankly, the most scientifically perilous qualification in the entire blueprint.
Oh, the psychological test.
Yes, because it isn't just about what you know, it's about who you are on a fundamental moral level. The text mandates a psychological and emotional test.
And the wording here is incredibly specific. The blueprint states that every candidate must undergo a scientific test to ensure their, quote, humanity, love for the people, absence of hypocrisy, and the wisdom to make appropriate decisions during crises.
Okay, let's stop and really parse those words. Absence of hypocrisy, love for the people.
It's intense.
If you require a Ph.D. for the science minister, I can verify that by calling a university registrar. I can check a piece of paper.
Right, it's an objective fact.
But how on earth do you scientifically calibrate a dipstick to measure human empathy?
It's a great question.
Humanity is inherently messy, right? It's
Yeah.
contradictory, it's deeply subjective. I understand testing if a pilot has the spatial awareness to fly a jet. But how do you mathematically quantify someone's love for the people?
It leads us directly into diagnostic muddy waters. The text insists this must be scientifically ensured, which implies the deployment of highly advanced psychometric evaluations.
Like deep psychological profiling and stress testing.
Exactly. You could imagine something akin to the rigorous multi-day psychological screening given to deep cover intelligence agents or astronauts.
Where they put them in a room and run simulated crisis scenarios to measure their physiological and emotional responses.
Right, but you are entirely correct to point out the subjective nature of the traits being measured. Absence of hypocrisy is an abstract moral concept. It's not a biological reality you can find in a blood test.
It feels incredibly reminiscent of the Voight-Kampff test in the movie Blade Runner.
Oh, yeah.
You know, where the interrogator monitors pupil dilation and microexpressions to determine if the subject is a human or a synthetic replicant based on their emotional reaction to hypothetical questions.
Just looking for that baseline empathy.
Exactly. And if a state-appointed scientific body administers this test and determines that your baseline empathy is too low or that you harbor latent hypocrisy, you are completely barred from running for office.
And the potential for that test to be weaponized is just astronomical.
Whoever designs the questions and whoever calibrates the acceptable range of human emotion essentially holds the keys to the entire government. They get to decide who is legally allowed to be considered a good person.
The vulnerability of the system lies precisely in that centralization of moral arbitration. Who watches the watchmen who are designing the empathy tests?
Right.
However, if we look at the pure theoretical intent of the blueprint, it is an attempt to solve a very real historical problem.
Okay, play devil's advocate for the test. What problem does it solve?
Well, psychologists and historians have long noted that positions of ultimate power disproportionately attract individuals with the dark triad personality traits.
Narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy.
Exactly. Sociopaths often make highly effective political climbers because they aren't burdened by empathy.
They don't care who they step on.
Right. So the Navbharat model is trying to build a firewall against that. It wants to ensure that the people holding the levers of state violence and economic control actually possess a functioning conscience.
And it is attempting to formalize that requirement into a strict legal prerequisite.
Yes.
Okay, so we synthesized the entry requirement so far. You have to be in the exact 25 to 55 age bracket. You must possess the correct educational degrees, potentially up to a Ph.D. for high office.
Right.
You have to pass a state-administered psychological screening to prove you aren't a hypocrite and that you genuinely care about humanity.
Got it.
And you have to achieve all of this completely on your own without the backing of a political party, without election symbols, and without capitalizing on immense personal or corporate wealth.
And this is the kicker. Clearing all of those hurdles doesn't even get you on the ballot.
Wait, really? All of that is just the prerequisite.
That just gives you the right to apply for the next phase because the Navbharat model completely re-engineers the mechanics of voting itself.
Yeah.
It deploys a highly unique two-tier election process.
Okay, walk me through this two-tier process. What is phase one?
The first tier, phase one, operates as a massive bottleneck. It is an entrance examination.
Like a written test.
Yes. Before a single citizen is allowed to cast a vote, all the candidates who met those baseline qualifications we just discussed must sit down and take a rigorous written exam.
Wow, what are they being tested on?
The text outlines the subjects. They must be tested on the Constitution, law, the economy, and the environment.
It's like a pop quiz for running the country?
It is an incredible fusion of concepts.
Huh.
It fundamentally merges the mechanics of a civil service examination with democratic voting.
Which has some historical precedent, right?
Oh, absolutely. Historically, civil service exams, dating all the way back to the imperial examinations in ancient China, were designed to select the administrative bureaucracy based on merit rather than aristocratic birth.
And most modern nations still use this, don't they?
We do. We use it to select our career diplomats, our tax agents, our public health officials. We demand that our doctors pass medical boards, our lawyers pass the bar exam, and our accountants pass certification tests.
Right, you can't just declare yourself a lawyer, you have to pass the bar.
Exactly. So the Navbharat Model asks a very simple, provocative question. Why do we demand rigorous, standardized testing for the people who execute the laws, but demand absolutely zero testing for the politicians who write them?
Man, when you frame it like that, it makes a brutal, undeniable kind of sense.
It really does.
It guarantees a highly elevated baseline of competence. Under this system, you can't just be incredibly charismatic and win over a crowd with soaring rhetoric. You have to actually know how the Constitution works.
You can't just promise to fix inflation with a catchy slogan.
Yeah.
You have to sit in a room with a pencil and prove you understand the mathematical realities of macroeconomics.
And environmental resource management.
Exactly. And the stakes of this phase one exam are absolute. The blueprint states that only the top 10 candidates with the highest marks advance to the next round.
Only the top 10.
That's it. It doesn't matter if you barely passed. If 10 people scored higher than you, your political journey is over.
It's like the preliminary rounds of a reality TV competition. It weeds out the amateurs through a brutal written exam.
And then the public votes in the finale.
Which brings us to phase two.
Yeah.
The public voting. The citizens finally go to the polls, but they aren't looking at a massive list of hopefuls.
No, they are looking at a highly curated ballot containing only the top 10 highest-scoring candidates from the entrance exam.
What's truly fascinating about this structure is how it surgically removes the classic lesser of two evils dilemma that plagues almost every modern democratic election.
Yes. In many current systems, voters often feel trapped into voting for a candidate they dislike simply to prevent a candidate they actively fear from taking power.
Right, the ballot is so often viewed as a choice between varying degrees of incompetence or corruption.
But under the Navbharat model, by the time the citizen sees the ballot, the system has already vetted the candidates relentlessly.
The voter knows, as an empirical fact, that every single one of the 10 names on that paper is highly educated, psychologically cleared for empathy, and possesses a documented top-tier understanding of law, the economy, and the environment.
The public is essentially asked to select the absolute best option from a menu of 10 highly qualified super candidates.
But, and I know there's a failsafe here, what if the public doesn't like any of them?
Ah, yes. Here is where the model introduces a massive systemic failsafe. Let's say those 10 candidates pass the constitutional exam with flying colors, and they possess their Ph.D s.
Okay.
But the public looks at them, listens to them speak, and universally decides, we don't trust any of these people. They might be smart, but they're completely out of touch.
Which happens all the time with technocrats.
Right. The blueprint grants the electorate the right to reject. If they don't trust the 10 exam passers, the public can reject them completely.
A literal reject all button on the ballot.
Yes. It serves as the ultimate necessary check on the technocracy. It ensures that while the system heavily prioritizes academic education and standardized test scores, it cannot completely override the gut instinct, the lived experience, and the consent of the governed.
If the phase one exam produces 10 brilliant but arrogant technocrats who cannot connect with the human realities of their constituents, the public can pull the emergency brake and refuse to legitimize them.
Exactly.
But the second-order effects of that reject all button are terrifying from a logistical standpoint.
Oh, completely chaotic.
Right. If the public hits that button, what happens next? Does it trigger an entirely new, months-long election cycle? Do they have to lower the passing grade on the exam to find 10 new people who might be more likable?
The blueprint isn't entirely clear on the timeline, but it implies a reset.
You look at countries like Belgium, they've gone through periods where they couldn't form a government for over 500 days due to political gridlock.
Yeah, 500 days of just administrative limbo.
If a highly demanding public perpetually hits reject all, you could have regions completely devoid of executive leadership for years, trapped in an endless loop of testing and rejecting.
It shows immense faith in the electorate, but it absolutely opens the door to systemic paralysis. It is unequivocally a high-risk, high-reward mechanism. It prefers temporary paralysis over the long-term damage of installing an untrusted technocrat.
Okay, but let us assume the system functions as intended. The exam produces 10 stellar candidates. The public goes to the polls, reviews the options, and they select one clear winner.
The victor.
Right, that individual becomes the administrator. In a traditional system, what happens to the other 9 candidates who lost?
Well, in a standard political environment, the losers give a concession speech. They thank their supporters, they go home, maybe they write a memoir.
They join a corporate board, or they spend the next 4 years raising money to run again. They become the opposition from the outside.
Right, but not in the Navbharat model. This blueprint refuses to let that intellectual capital go to waste.
This might be my favorite part of the whole document.
It is perhaps one of the most innovative, disruptive, and psychologically complex ideas in the entire text. The 9 candidates who do not win the public vote do not go into exile.
What happens to them?
Because they demonstrated extreme competence by passing the grueling entrance exam, the text dictates that they are immediately appointed as members of an advisory council.
I want to really dig into the human friction of this. Imagine you spend months campaigning. You pass the psychological evaluations. You score in the top 10 on a brutal macroeconomic exam.
You put your whole life into it.
And then you lose the final public vote by a slim margin. Instead of going home to lick your wounds, the government says, "Congratulations, here is your desk. It is right down the hall from the person who just defeated you, and you are going to sit in a room with them every single day."
It's so awkward.
Yeah.
And their role is not merely ceremonial. They aren't there just to offer polite, ignorable suggestions. The text grants this advisory council the explicit authority to audit the administrators.
That is wild.
They are institutionalized, highly qualified internal auditors whose entire mandate is to watch the winners every single move.
It's like being forced to hire the 9 people you just beat out for a promotion, and their only job is to audit your work.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the game theory of that dynamic. In a traditional 2-party system, the loser becomes the vocal opposition. Their primary incentive is often to obstruct the winner, highlight their failures, and ensure the incumbent looks bad so the opposition can win the next election cycle.
Right, it's adversarial by design.
But here, there are no political parties to return to. These 9 people are all independent experts. By forcing them into an advisory council with auditing power, the model is essentially hardwiring a team of rivals into the constitutional framework.
It's like Abraham Lincoln appointing his fiercest political opponents to his cabinet, but mandated by law.
Yes. It entirely re-engineers the incentive structure of a political runner-up. Instead of plotting a revolution from the outside, they are integrated directly into the administrative machinery.
Think about the resources, the time, the education, the psychometric testing spent on preparing these candidates. The model asks, you have 10 people who prove they possess an elite understanding of the economy. Why on earth would you only utilize one of them?
The winner is given the authority to execute the policy, but the 9 runners-up ensure that the policy is fundamentally sound and that the execution is transparent and honest.
It is the academic concept of peer review applied directly to day-to-day governance. You can't just publish a wild theory. Your peers, who are just as smart as you, have to audit your data.
Which makes total sense given the model's heavy emphasis on academic degrees and Ph.D.s.
Right, it's very academic in its structure.
But what exactly is the winner executing? How does this blueprint structure the actual day-to-day jobs of these administrators?
The document enforces a strict single portfolio system. One individual will hold the charge of only one department. There is zero multitasking allowed at the executive level.
So you cannot be the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Corporate Affairs simultaneously, even if those fields are closely related.
Nope. You have one highly specific job, and you execute it with absolute laser focus.
But what about the top of the pyramid? What does the Prime Minister or the Chief Minister actually do if they can't hold portfolios?
The text is very explicit on this. The Prime Minister or Chief Minister will not handle any specific portfolios whatsoever. Their sole responsibility is the coordination of all the departments.
I'm trying to visualize this. So the prime minister is like an orchestra conductor.
Oh, I like that.
They don't play the violin, they don't play the timpani, they just make sure everyone else is playing the same song.
Or, to use a tech analogy, the Prime Minister in this model is essentially the operating system of a computer.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. The operating system doesn't actually open the word processor. It doesn't render the graphics for the web browser. The specialized applications do that.
The operating system's only job is to allocate the RAM, manage the battery power, and ensure that the applications don't crash into each other and freeze the computer.
That is an incredibly apt way to look at it. In many current governmental systems, the chief executive often hoards important portfolios. A prime minister might concurrently make themselves the Minister of Defense or the Minister of External Affairs, centralizing immense power.
Which is a huge bottleneck.
The Navbharat model views this as an extreme bottleneck and a massive conflict of interest. The executive should not be down in the weeds, micromanaging the daily logistics of a specific department. They should be hovering above the entire apparatus.
Managing the massive logistical puzzle of making all these highly specialized Ph.D.-led departments work together seamlessly.
It's designed like an idealized, hyper-efficient corporate structure. You have your CEO, who coordinates but doesn't micromanage production, your specialized department heads running their divisions.
And your board of directors, the advisory council of 9 rivals, auditing the books.
Exactly. But this model doesn't just want its administrators sitting in air-conditioned boardrooms looking at macroeconomic spreadsheets.
No.
No, it demands that they get their boots in the mud.
Okay, let's talk about the boots-on-the-ground mandates. Because the text shifts gears dramatically from structural theory to direct action here.
It places an incredibly heavy, almost punishing physical burden on the elected officials. It legally mandates direct inspection.
Direct inspection, what does that actually mean?
Administrators are forbidden from merely ruling from an ivory tower or relying on reports from subordinates. They must personally step down from their offices and thoroughly inspect their wards.
And they aren't just walking around looking for potholes or shaking hands for a photo op.
No, the text lists specific, massive societal metrics they are responsible for. It dictates that they must ensure that not a single ward suffers from poverty, homelessness, lack of education or employment, or unresolved health and legal issues.
Not a single ward. That is a mandate of absolute zero tolerance.
It is an absolutist utopian mandate enforced by legal decree. The shift here is profound. It moves political leadership from the realm of theoretical policymaking to localized, mandatory fieldwork.
The politician is no longer just a philosophical leader debating the nuances of law in a distant capital city.
Right, they are legally mandated to be a hyper-vigilant, boots-on-the-ground problem solver.
This essentially treats the role of a politician less like a statesman and more like a regional manager of a highly demanding logistics company where failure is not an option.
It really does.
I want you, the listener, to really imagine the friction of this in the real world. Think about your local representative. Imagine them having to personally guarantee that not a single person in your entire neighborhood, your entire district, is dealing with an unresolved legal issue.
Or an unresolved health issue.
The sheer administrative bandwidth required to even track that information, let alone actively solve every single case, is absolutely staggering. It borders on the physically impossible for a single human being.
It is staggeringly ambitious and honestly perhaps logistically impossible without a massive underlying bureaucracy doing the heavy lifting. But the blueprint anticipates the excuse of, "We are trying our best."
They don't accept trying.
Not at all. It explicitly mandates evidence-based governance. The text states that moving beyond mere promises or rhetorical assurances, administrators must prove the changes they have brought to society by providing clear records and verifiable evidence to the public.
So the era of "trust me, I'm fighting for you" is entirely over.
Completely over.
You cannot just stand at a podium and give a rousing speech about how you've championed the working class. You have to produce the receipts.
Here is the verified spreadsheet showing the 400 homeless individuals we housed this month with their current addresses.
Here are the time-stamped before and after photos of the school infrastructure we upgraded. It shifts the burden of proof entirely onto the politician. You have to justify your continued employment every single day with hard, auditable data.
Exactly. And there is a third, highly specific component to this ground-level mandate: empathy.
Empathy again.
Yes. The text states that during times of crisis, Public representatives must work alongside the people with utmost sincerity and care.
Which loops right back to that psychological test we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
The one testing for love of the people and absence of hypocrisy.
This is where that theoretical psychometric test is supposed to manifest in the physical world.
If there is a catastrophic flood or a viral pandemic or a localized economic collapse, the leader isn't supposed to just hold a press conference from a secure bunker and allocate funds.
They're supposed to be out there, physically carrying sandbags, working alongside the citizens.
It demands that leadership is a shared physical and emotional burden, not just a managerial role.
Right. But as you noted earlier, tracking this evidence, communicating these complex statistics, and maintaining this level of direct contact with millions of citizens requires immense infrastructure.
It does.
If the burden of proof is on the administrators to provide evidence, how do the citizens actually collect, view, and verify that evidence on a daily basis without getting bogged down in freedom of information requests?
And that is exactly where the Navbharat model leans heavily into modern ubiquitous technology.
Yes, the tech platform.
This isn't a system that relies on town hall meetings once a month in a stuffy gymnasium. It relies on the creation of what I can only call a digital panopticon.
The blueprint outlines a comprehensive tech platform designed to entirely collapse the distance between the governed and the governor.
It mandates the creation of a citizen portal, right?
Yeah. Yes. An official government mobile app and website. The explicit purpose of this platform is to allow the public to interact directly with administrators via real-time chat.
Real-time chat.
And to independently verify the evidence of development activities we just discussed.
Okay, let's stop and really visualize the sheer chaos of this. Real-time chat. Imagine having your mayor or your member of parliament essentially functioning as a contact in your WhatsApp.
Just right there on your phone?
Hey, the pothole on 5th Street is still there. What's the status? Hey, my grandmother's pension check didn't arrive. Please fix this.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't like the new zoning laws.
It democratizes access to power in a way that is almost terrifyingly direct. Historically, accessing a politician required navigating layers of secretaries, writing formal letters, waiting for weeks, or attending specific, highly controlled events.
This app theoretically puts the ultimate decision maker in the pocket of every single citizen at all times.
But I know you're going to push back on the human reality of this again.
I have to. How does a single human being, even a highly qualified Ph.D. who passed a psychological resilience test manage real-time chat with hundreds of thousands or potentially millions of constituents without having a complete nervous breakdown?
The volume of incoming messages would be astronomical.
If they outsource it to a team of interns, or if they just use an AI chatbot to filter the noise, doesn't that completely defeat the entire purpose of the psychological empathy test and the legal mandate for direct, sincere connection?
That is the ultimate practical friction point of this proposal, the absolute limitation of human bandwidth. The model desires total accessibility, but human beings require sleep, and they can only read so many words per minute.
Exactly.
To mitigate the digital divide, however, the model also mandates that for those who do not know how to use the internet or for whom the app is inaccessible, 24/7 toll-free call centers will be established in all constituencies.
So there is quite literally always a line of communication open. Day or night, via app or phone call, the citizen can reach into the government. But it's not just a giant complaint box, is it? The app serves as a permanent, unerasable tracking device for their political promises.
Yes. The text introduces the concept of rigid performance targets. Administrators must publicly announce their 5-year targets in their very first year in office.
They lock in their goals.
And then they must submit an annual report card to the citizens via this platform.
A report card. Again, it is pulling so heavily from aggressive corporate accountability structures.
Very much so.
In a major corporation, you have key performance indicators, KPIs. If the CEO doesn't hit their quarterly KPIs, the board of directors fires them.
Right.
Here, the politician has to set their 5-year goals on day 1, and every single year they have to publish a report card showing exactly what grade they earned based on the verifiable evidence they collected.
It ties an administrator's fate to transparent, trackable, and mathematically verifiable metrics. What this does is completely eliminate the ability to execute a narrative pivot.
A narrative pivot. Explain that.
In current politics, a leader might promise to build 10 hospitals in year 1. By year 4, they realize they failed. So they run their re-election campaign focused entirely on a completely different emotional issue like border security or cultural values to distract the voters from the failed hospitals.
Right, look over here, don't look at the hospitals.
Under this model, the app remembers. The report card is public, and it highlights the failure in red ink. You cannot pivot away from your established KPIs.
So you have this app, you're tracking the promises, you're looking at the evidence of the poverty reduction, you're theoretically chatting with the administrator.
But there's a darker side to the app.
Let's look at the darkest, most critical function of this digital panopticon. What if a citizen uses that app not to ask for a status update on a bridge, but to report that the administrator is actively stealing money?
What if they uncover corruption?
Right. This is where the Navbharat model stops being a highly demanding administrative blueprint and reveals itself as an absolutely relentless, deeply punitive machine.
The model's response to corruption is arguably its most draconian and structurally terrifying feature. It operates like a sword of Damocles hanging over the neck of every single person in power.
The threat hanging over these administrators is immense, and it actually starts before they even take the oath of office with the asset audit.
Correct. The text dictates that candidates must publicly declare their complete asset details before the election.
Now, declaring assets is fairly standard in many functioning democracies.
It is, but the Navbharat model adds a set of razor-sharp teeth to this requirement. The government will conduct a mandatory, aggressive, and highly detailed audit of these assets every single year.
They're tracking every penny coming in and going out of the administrator's accounts, looking for unexplained wealth.
So the state's financial apparatus is watching their bank accounts. But the citizens are watching too. And this is where that app comes back into play, weaponized with the right to recall.
Right to recall.
Yes. If citizens report corruption or poor governance via the app or the toll-free number, it acts as a direct legal trigger. It doesn't just go into a suggestion box. An investigation is immediately launched.
And if the administrator is proven guilty of embezzlement or corruption, the punishment is swift, absolute, and devastating. It is a 4-part penalty.
Let's walk through these 4 parts because it is essentially a financial and professional execution.
First, they are subjected to immediate removal from office. There are no lengthy, multi-year impeachment trials that drag on while the accused remains in power, leveraging their office to protect themselves.
They're simply instantaneously gone.
That is merely step 1. Step 2 is where the blueprint demonstrates its absolute lack of mercy toward the abuse of public trust. A penalty equivalent to double the embezzled amount will be levied against the guilty individual.
I'm genuinely shocked by the sheer mathematical severity of this. The double penalty.
If you look at standard legal systems, if a corrupt official gets caught, the worst financial outcome is usually that they are ordered to return the money they stole and perhaps pay a standard fixed fine on top of it.
Right, it's a slap on the wrist.
But doubling the embezzled amount, let's do the math on the reality of that. If an administrator steals $1 million and they get caught, they don't just give the million back, they personally owe the state $2 million.
Exactly. It is a policy explicitly designed to fundamentally and completely bankrupt the corrupt individual.
Yeah.
It alters the calculus of deterrence.
It turns political theft from a calculated risk, where you might get to hide some of the money offshore for when you get out into an act of guaranteed, inescapable financial ruin if caught.
If you steal enough, doubling that amount ensures you will lose your home, your investments, your entire accumulated generational wealth. You will be left with less than zero. You will owe the state for the rest of your life.
It is a financial guillotine, so they've lost their job. They are completely, utterly bankrupted, stripped of all assets. What is step 3?
Imprisonment will be awarded, mandatory jail time. And because the state just sees double what you stole, leaving you entirely destitute, you absolutely cannot buy your way out of it with high-priced legal defense teams.
And the final nail in the coffin, step 4. A lifelong ban from contesting elections for any public office will be rigidly enforced.
Their career, their reputation, and their financial existence are permanently, irreversibly terminated.
When you look at how this ties the entire system together, the psychological atmosphere it creates is almost suffocating.
It's incredibly high pressure.
Think about the life of an administrator existing inside the Navbharat model. You are only in office because you passed a brutal, highly selective exam and a psychological empathy test.
Right.
You are constantly, daily audited by the 9 extremely smart, highly motivated people you just defeated who are sitting on your advisory council watching your every move.
Waiting for you to mess up.
You are tracked by millions of citizens who have you on real-time chat on their phones, demanding instant results. You have to submit an annual report card proving with hard data that you've eradicated poverty in your ward.
And if you slip up,
If the pressure gets to you and you steal a single dime, you are fired, bankrupted, thrown in a cell, and banned for life. The sheer crushing pressure of holding office must be immense.
It is a relentlessly engineered, unforgiving machine. It is designed to aggressively weed out corruption, mandate extreme, testable competence, and place politicians under a microscope of public and peer accountability that has almost no historical precedent anywhere in the world.
It assumes that extreme pressure produces diamonds of governance.
Let's zoom out and synthesize what we've unpacked today. We started this deep dive by talking about the difference between renovating a house and bringing in the bulldozers to dynamite the foundation.
And this is definitely the bulldozer.
The Navbharat Model takes a wrecking ball to political parties, to campaign finance, to heuristics, and to the very idea of a career politician.
In its place, it builds a fortress of technocracy. Age limits, mandatory Ph.D.s, psychological screenings, civil service exams for elected officials, a digital panopticon of citizen oversight, and a double penalty financial guillotine for corruption.
And as we established at the beginning, our objective today was to explore the structural mechanics of this specific blueprint. We are not evaluating its radical economic paradigms, nor its specific political philosophies.
No endorsements here.
Right. But as an exercise in pure systems design, it forces us to ask profound, uncomfortable questions about what we truly value in leadership. Do we want charismatic representatives who share our tribal affiliations and forgive our flaws? Or do we want highly tested, relentlessly audited, high-performing technocrats who operate under the constant threat of ruin?
It completely redefines the job description of a politician, from leader to hyper-accountable logistical manager. And that brings me to a final thought for you, the learner, as we wrap up this deep dive. Something for you to mull over on your own as you step away from this and go about your day.
Okay, what is it?
We've spent this entire time looking at a system engineered to be perfectly logical, ruthlessly efficient, and absolutely unforgivingly accountable. It is a machine designed to enforce perfection.
Right.
But humanity, at its core, is flawed. We make mistakes, we get tired, we fail. So if you build a governance machine with no room for human flaw, no political parties to provide ideological shelter, instantaneous chat demands from millions of angry citizens, and severe bankrupting punishments for a single failure.
Does it create a utopia of perfect, highly empathetic public servants?
Or does it create a system so terrifying, so high pressure, and so punishing that no truly empathetic, normal human being would ever want to run for office in the first place?
It is the ultimate paradox of demanding perfect accountability from imperfect beings.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this teardown and rebuild of the machinery of state. Keep questioning the systems around you, keep looking at the blueprints beneath the surface, and we will see you on the next deep dive.